All right, we should be live. I always go over here and test it out. What did I just do? I don't know what I did. All right. I think I got to start that over again. Where am I?
Yeah, and I'll have to lean on you about how to screen share.
Okay. Right now I'm screen sharing and showing everyone how dopey I am with this. Stand by, folks. My channel. Okay, there it is. Okay, so now I'm back. I can see the chat there. So I've turned off my sound. Now I can see the chat. All right. Let me get it started here. I want to thank everyone for showing up, and I definitely want to thank Chris for accepting the invite to come on. What I'd like to see happen here is not go into like a 2-hour thing here, but the topic tonight is just the 8 inches times the mile squared. I figured let's start with something everyone's heard of, everyone recites, everyone has an idea about it. So I've asked Chris to explain 8 inches times the mile squared, and let's keep it to that, and hopefully that's what we'll focus on tonight. And
Can I jump in here, Jesse?
oh yeah.
How about if we start with explaining why the crosshair dips in the horizon? That was one of the ones I was prepared for.
Oh, tonight was the title here is how does the 8 inches times the mile squared formula work? So I mean, if that's part of your explanation for it, you know. And by the way, I'm gonna like right after I just kind of do this little intro, which I think I'm done with what I had to say. I was going to turn the floor over to you and give you the screen, and I've got a few books open that we might look at as well. But let me. Why do I keep doing that? I'm trying to give you the screen. There. Okay. Here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and make you the presenter. And if you want to talk about what did you say? Something dipping? Whatever you want to.
Yeah, I think one of your skills that you wanted to do is why the vertical angle measures the horizon dips below the horizontal plane, or that also ties into why when you set up and backsight something that you can set on the line sighting back and you get more than 180 degrees.
Yeah, that's definitely another topic. So what I'm really trying to do is figure out how to make you the presenter. Here we go. I think I can do it now. I'm going to present you to everyone. And I guess that's all I needed to do. You are now presenting. Let's see if that shows up over on YouTube that way. It's a little lag time. Huh. There might be on your end a need to accept to be the presenter. I've just made you the presenter, but I think you might have to like take it, and run with it, so to speak.
Which up in the left hand corner, you got a blue box, green arrow.
Yeah, the green arrow. Hold on. Darn it. I think I made myself the presenter. Hold on a second. Stop presenting. Okay, so here. I grabbed the wrong one. I'm going to present you to everyone. Now that should be you.
Yeah, I think so. So
there you are. Okay. Well, all right. Now I've got to make it so that if I say anything, I will not interrupt. I guess. All right. You're on. So
Okay.
yeah, so we're starting with describe or explain the 8 inches times the mile squared formula. How does that formula work? Is what we're looking for.
Well, the easiest way to do it is the miles times 8 inches, or eight. Now you can go through the whole complicated formula, but they both work out exactly the same.
Okay. So how does the formula, once you've calculated the result, how does it work?
What do you mean by that? What do you mean?
Well, like what do you do with that number? What does that number calculate?
It calculates the drop from your feet out in any direction in the globe model.
Go. Can you go a little further because I'm not following that.
Well, that's pretty much it. In the globe model, wherever your feet are standing, the globe should drop off for the terrain at 8 inches per mile squared in every direction from where you're standing.
From my feet. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because supposedly you're always standing on the top of the ball.
Okay. Have you looked at this formula in any surveying textbooks?
No, I have not. I've looked at it extensively in CAD, which I think is a much more accurate representation.
Well, have you looked at this formula in Samuel Rowbotham's books?
No, I've read a few of his books.
Yeah, but I mean, he talks about it. He talks about this formula quite a bit. I mean, like practically every single one of his examples. I think a lot of people think he only is, he's pretty famous for that Bedford level thing. But I've been looking through his books and there's lots and lots of examples and they're all about the 8 inches times the mile squared. And he talks about a theodolite all the time. He never really mentions anything about it coming from your feet. So,
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to start with I think one of your questions was, and again, when you did your experiment across, I forget what lake it was, where you set up your transit above the water level and then went and set up a target on the other side of the lake, and you put your transit at a zenith of 90 and sighted that target, it was below the crosshair, correct?
yes,
Okay, so then you wrote down what that zenith angle was that you had to turn down to your target. Then you went to the other side of the lake and repeated the exact same thing, correct?
yes, that's called near time reciprocal zenith angles. Yeah. Now, if
Right.
I had someone with me, we could have each been on either side of the lake observing simultaneously, which is preferable. But I managed to get those observations completed pretty much within the hour, which that's not too bad. But go ahead.
So, in your opinion, that proves curvature of the Earth.
Uh, I guess yeah. Well, you could say that. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing I've concocted or come up with. It's standard survey work. It's standard surveying. Like I didn't invent that. It's called near time reciprocal zenith angle measurements. And I went to that lake to try it out to see what it would look like. Have you ever done that?
No, I have not.
Okay. Now I also did it on land. I went to uh, I went to two mileposts, 28, 27 and 28 on Route 206, and just pretty much did the same thing there and kind of, actually came up with the same results. Actually, I did Route 206 first. Then a lot of the comments were, oh no, you got to do that on water. So then I went over to two lakes. I went to a little lake. It was only about 900 feet across and saw the same thing. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. Because like I said, I set the instrument and the targets above the water line at the same height, so they were level with each other. And there was a very calm lake down. It's called Union Lake down in the Millville area. So that told me it was worth trying it on a larger scale, and that's when I did the Cooper River Lake. It's called Cooper River Lake. It's a dammed lake, and it is a lake, so it's a level lake, and did the same thing there and saw the same thing. So uh, yeah,
Well,
taking the time to make these observations. Um, so, but back to the 8 inches times the miles squared formula. You know,
well,
you can plug the numbers in and come up with a number. Now you have to do something with the number. How is the number applied?
well, I think let's get back to this other subject here because I think that's going to tie in to what you're asking right now. Because these observations that you're making is tied into what you believe is the 8 inches per mile squared in your observations.
Well, I make the observation. I don't apply any calculation to what I'm measuring. I record what I measured, right? So I didn't like calculate what I'm seeing. I just point at the target, write down the observation, you know? So then it's later on, you could take those observations and determine what those relationships are. And it turns out to be 8 inches times the mile squared. Dropping from what? That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. It isn't dropping from my feet. It's dropping from the crosshair of the theodolite that has been set to be 90, which is extending a plane from your location. And that is what 8 inches times the mile squared calculates. And that's the part that I think everyone is just ignoring. So they'll calculate 8 inches times the mile squared to something that's what, 5 miles away, 10 miles away, 30 miles away, whatever. But at no time do they ever bother to establish the plane that is tangent at your observing location. See, do you understand that part?
Yes, you made it a lot clearer there. If you had asked me, what is the 8 inches mile per squared? What is that tied to when you're observing through an instrument? It would have been much clearer.
Oh, I just threw it out there. How does the 8 inches times the mile square formula work? And please elaborate. Go ahead and tell me. You began with something to do with it starts at your feet and you're on top of the ball. I'm just talking about surveying. Whether we're on a ball or not, you can tell me how 8 inches times the mile square works on the flat Earth. Go ahead. I mean, I'm giving the floor to you to explain that formula, how it works, and how it's used. And from your perspective, you're going to tell me how it works on flat Earth. I'd like to hear that.
Well, it works the same way. Have you ever heard of John F. Heather?
No,
He worked for the Royal Military College back in the 1800s.
it's something to look up. Maybe we can add this to a future talk. What's his name again?
It's J.F. Heather.
J.F. Heather, like HEA.
Ther.
Okay, and he's with the Royal.
Royal Military College. And the book is Trustees on Mechanical Instruments, wrote in 1849.
1849. Maybe I'll bother to get that from you later, but I'd like to look that up. But so
Well,
does he talk about the 8 inches times the mile squared formula?
it ties into what you just said about when you look through your instrument, trying to figure out the screen share here. Can you see that?
Hide that hangout thing. There you go. Okay, cool. Let's see.
And I won't read through this whole thing. I'll just kind of. What he did was, is he noticed when he went out and he set up just a tube without any magnification or optics in it, that if he set it level, he would see what you see in figure 31, where when he looked through this tube at perfect level with extremely accurate crosshairs and a pinhole at the back, he would see what he's seen in figure 31. Okay, over in figure 30, when he set up a transit or a level, spirit level, he would see this through his instrument in figure 30. So he was challenged because he thought it was refraction within the transit or the spirit level. So he invited a bunch of surveyors out to set up their instruments and put them perfectly level and put their theodolites or their transits at 90 degrees zenith and then look out at the horizon. And what they discovered is yes, the horizon was below the crosshair. But what they also discovered was that depending on the magnification of the transit, depending on how many lenses were from the front to the back of the eyepiece, the angle drop to the horizon was different in every instrument. So through his conclusion is that isn't the drop in the actual horizon. That's exactly how it works with magnification through an instrument. It's refraction. So what I did was I went out and did a test to test this theory. I went out and set up set 2 spikes in the ground, made sure they were perfectly level, set up a theodolite, set up a level, and set up the crosshairs in both these instruments at the exact same elevation. Then pointed them at the exact same target. This is through the auto level. You see the power pole where these insulators are? Now this is through the transit. See where the crosshair is above the insulators?
I'm not sure I see the insulators. I see your crosshair.
These right here. Can you see that?
When you put your mouse there, like a box showed up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there. Okay, that thing there. Okay.
Okay, now we'll go back to the level. See the difference between the two? And they're both exactly level. They're both looking at the exact same target. What that is what they call refraction or instrument error or instrument aberration. Now they've known that.
Where's the term instrument aberration come from? Refraction, I'm familiar with.
Well, we'll call it refraction then, or barrel distortion within the instrument. And this has been known since the 1850s.
I mean, here's what I'd say about what you're showing me right now is that there's an obvious difference between your two instruments. they're not looking at the same thing, or they're not adjusted similarly. They ought to be, if they are in adjustment and you've set them up level with each other, you're saying that both of those crosshairs are at the same elevation, right? Is that so? I understand you.
Exactly.
Then they should be looking at the same thing. So you have maladjusted instrument, or maybe both of them are. I don't know.
Have you ever done this?
No, but I will, because I haven't seen this before. So, and I didn't know about this book, so I will go look at it.
Well, like I said, this has been known since 1859. And
When did you find out about it?
I've been going over this with a friend of mine out in Australia, Glenn, and another friend in Germany. And then I don't know if you know Zach, Good Times for All.
Who?
Zach, Good Times for All. That's his channel.
I don't know. But so you found out about this kind of recently?
Yeah, a couple months ago.
Okay, so it's relatively new to you, and it's brand new to me right now. So I'll get this book, and I think you need to adjust your instruments.
No, that's the difference in those, Jesse. The difference between these two is nothing more than the magnification. The transit is at a 30 magnification, and the level is at a 24 magnification. And this is typical in every instrument.
What would you estimate the differences between those? A couple of feet from the crosshair down to the insulator, and then the other one is practically on the insulator. What would you think? It's about
a good foot and a half. It's hard to
a foot and a half. So by what you're saying, if you were to traverse with your, can you go back and show the two instruments?
up, blown up.
Huh?
See those? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, you had shown the two instruments near each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Look. Okay. So by what you've shown, and if you are assuming that both these instruments are in good adjustment, that if you were to traverse with that Topcon, what is that, a 313 or Topcon 303? What is it? Is that your Topcon?
Yeah.
Okay. If you were to traverse with that Topcon down to that telephone pole, okay, a good traverse methodology, carrying a three-dimensional traverse is what I'm suggesting.
X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and you went and got yourself down to that pole, and determined the elevation of the bottom of the pole. And let me figure out how I want to describe this to you, so we can talk about it. Well, let's just say you get yourself close enough to the pole that you could do a trig elevation to those insulators, right? And get that answer, okay? And you're happy with that answer. In fact, maybe you've even run back here for closure, okay? Then you ran levels with your leveling instrument right there, and you ran levels to that telephone pole, and then somehow we're able to get a measurement up the pole to the insulators. Would those two surveys agree with each other, or would they reveal a foot and a half difference?
Well, they would probably agree with each other if you did. Now, the trig leveling is not the way to do it. Trig leveling will never be as accurate as as differential level.
Well, let's qualify that or quantify it. By what difference would there be? An inch? I mean, have you run trigonometric level traverses and closed back to yourself within hundredths of a foot? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, over short distances. And yes, if you take in what you're talking about is doing short leg traverses from here to that telephone pole and coming back. Now, the
Yeah. Let's pause right there. I don't want to get into the minutia. I'm just trying to broad brush a general idea that we can go into the greater detail. But just so you understand, so that we're on the same page, if you traverse to that telephone pole using whatever length sights you think you need to do to get the accuracy you need, let's just say we want to compare these two instruments to make sure that they're at least within a half inch of each other. That if I go out and do construction layout with that TopCon in that field right there, let's say I got to lay out a building, a pad, right? And I'm going to use that TopCon and lay out that work. And then I say, well, but I got to check some levels with this leveling instrument. I would think that those two things ought to agree with each other, correct?
yes,
Okay.
reasonably, like you said, within an inch.
Well, I think on a local construction site, you better be able to repeat yourself to better than an inch. It better be an eighth. It better be like an eighth of an inch, a hundredth, right?
Let's say we're going around a block, yeah, within a hundredth of two.
Yeah, right there in that field, right out in that field. You're going to lay out a brand new Wawa. We have Wawas out here. Do you have Wawas?
Wawa. What's that?
That's a convenience store.
Oh,
7-Eleven.
oh yeah.
A Dunkin' Donuts.
Some like that, you'd be within 100.
Okay, 100th. Good.
Yeah.
Now, can you run a survey? How far away is that telephone pole?
Yeah, probably a couple miles.
Okay. Can you run a traverse, a 3D traverse, to the telephone pole and back and close within an inch?
Yes.
Okay, good. Can you run levels with your leveling instrument down to that telephone pole and back and close within an inch?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So now, if you do that and you get down to that telephone pole and you measure up to those insulators, are you going to close within an inch or not?
Yes.
Okay, then therefore, one of these instruments or both of them is out of adjustment because you're not looking at the same thing with these instruments.
No.
And testing this.
What you're doing, Jesse, what you're doing now is you're comparing long distance shots to short shots where that does not take into effect the refraction over long distances.
Oh, well, refraction. Listen, we can talk about refraction. Let's talk about refraction in just 1 minute. Once we clarify the fact that you have two instruments here that ought to be able to match each other on this local construction site, or if we run surveys all the way to the telephone pole and back, they should agree with each other.
And they will.
And all we're doing here in this photo is taking pictures through the telescope. We would not consider that to be a survey measurement. I do it all the time. I take pictures through my telescope, but I tell people, hey, this is not like a surveying procedure. It's not so much a measurement as it is me just taking a picture through my telescope to show people what it looks like when I'm looking through it. But it isn't a measurement. But you are showing two instruments that you say are set up level with each other, and they ought to be looking at the same thing if they are in adjustment to each other. And obviously, they're not. And that's about all you can say about this little test. I've done tests very similarly, not with the telephone pole, but having two instruments set up at the same height, looking at the same thing, and seeing the same thing in both of them. I would be really surprised or alarmed if one of my instruments was not looking at the same thing. I would instantly check. I would do a peg test on the level to make sure that the C factor was small, or I would check the crosshair in my theodolite to make sure I've got good repetition in direct and reverse. That's the other thing that could be going on here, is that your theodolite you would have to do direct and reverse. Let me ask you that. Did you flip the scope in the reverse position in phase two and take a picture in that direction? Because I kind of suspect that might be what's going on there.
Well, well, no, I didn't do it in that instant.
Okay, well, give that a try. Now let's try to print. This is all cool stuff, man. To find out about a book. I love books from the 1800s. I got a whole bunch of them. I'm always interested in these things, so I will definitely check out this J.F. Heather and his book from 1849. In fact, if you could just send me like an email with the full title and all that, I'll look it up. Or did you download a PDF of it? You could just send me a link to that.
Yeah, I can send you a link.
Now, okay, now let's get to refraction. So I'll listen to you. Go ahead and talk about refraction.
Refraction within the instrument?
You mean refraction inside the instrument? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's what's going on here.
You're not talking about atmospheric refraction?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about within the instrument itself.
Sounds to me like you're talking about parallax. And by the way, if there is such a thing as refraction inside an instrument, that's news to me. I will research that. That's what this is all about, right? Doing some research, and and I'm the first to always admit things that I do not know. So if there is such a thing as refraction inside the instrument, I want to learn about that. I've, in all my years, have never heard of that. I do know about parallax. That's something we need to adjust properly, keep that correct so that our observations are correct. For everybody listening, we got like 59 watching, and the chat is zooming pretty good here. Surveying is about measuring, and there's instrumental error. We can go into the whole discussion on types of error. The first one you want to avoid is just making blunders, mistakes, setting up on the wrong point, measuring your instrument to be 5 feet and really it's 5.5. You blew a half a foot there. So those are blunders. We have to develop procedures that trap that human potential to just make mistakes. So that's why we repeat observations. We include redundancy in our work, and we have methods and procedures to try to avoid what every human is capable of, and that is just making a daggone mistake. So that's one source of error. The other sources of error are instrumental. In other words, no instrument is built perfectly. They have their own idiosyncrasies, and therefore you need to develop observational procedures that account for that. For instance, measuring angles. We would never measure angles with only face one. Face one means the telescope is in one direction. We flop the scope and measure that angle again in the reverse direction, that is in face two. And we do repeated sets of those to account for imperfections in the instrument. It's just one example. An example with leveling, you would, when you're, well, there's lots of examples for instrumental error. I noticed Larry Scott's in the chat. I'm sure he'll chime in with me on some of this. And then, of course, there's atmospheric or what are called they're called systematic errors. And for instance, we don't measure with tapes very much anymore. But if you're pulling a tape, you want to pull that tape at the same tension. You want to account for the difference in temperature that the tape was standardized to, compared to the temperature that you're now measuring under, whether it's 30 degrees Fahrenheit or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Those are going to change the length of the tape, so you have to compute that and apply that correction. So those are called systematic errors. And refraction would be in that category. And it's a bugger. It's like, one day you can go out and the atmospheric conditions are fantastic. You can see really far. You can make a lot of far distance type measurements. Another day you go out there and you can't measure to the target at all. It's so, it's so blurry. It's moving around. Therefore, on that day, you're going to have to shorten up your sights and deal with the conditions that you're working under at that time. So, and refraction is one of those things. Refraction is bending the light, and it's been well characterized to the point that we can estimate it, but it's always there, and it isn't. You can't make it go away. So you have to deal with it, and it depends on the accuracy you're looking for, how you're going to deal with it, and what effort you'll put into dealing with it. And some things you're doing are to the nearest foot, and it doesn't matter. But when you're looking for the highest precisions, you're probably going to put thermistors at the observing station and at the target station. You're going to do some high order type methodology to try to estimate the effects of refraction much, much better. But the bottom line of refraction is that it straightens out the curvature. It tends to lift things up. So I'll end there. That was my little rant on instrumentation, adjusting the instruments, our procedures, and where refraction enters in and what category of effect it falls under. Refraction is not an instrumental error. It's a natural phenomenon that we deal with out in nature every day. So do you want to add anything to that, or
Yeah. I think a good test for you to do is to take out your theodolite that has been columnated correctly, take out a Denny level and do the same test I did and see what you come up with.
describe the test?
The one that I just did. Set them up both exactly with the crosshairs at the exact same elevation and sight out to a target and see if your crosshairs are lined up exactly the same.
Okay, so you're saying take I get what you're saying. Do what you did there. Take my T2, I guess. Would that be the preferred instrument to try this with?
Whichever instrument that is correct and columnated and you trust to be.
Well, I collimate my instruments routinely, and so I will tell you this: I would if I'm pointing those two instruments that are collimated and adjusted and supposed to be at the same height, they ought to be looking at the same thing. In this case, you're looking 2 miles away. The level is not. Well, there's two problems with this test, as I see it. You're way beyond the specifications on the level. You're just way beyond it. And I've used, Homestar says, but let's measure in direct reverse. I think I covered that. You're way beyond the specification on the level to use it as a level. So I would never expect to see 1 foot agreement in this picture. Like, I've taken my level and, well, here, people have seen the picture of Philadelphia and the Empire State Building and stuff. I mean, those are pictures through the telescope. I would never claim to say, it's to the nearest inch over there on that building. Is it plus or minus 10 feet? Heck yeah. It's plus or minus 10 feet. If you want to really open it up, it's plus or minus 20 feet. But we're looking at hundreds of feet, like hundreds and hundreds of feet of drop. So I think the picture serves its purpose. So comparing a level instrument that's designed to work out there on that construction site. Can you go back to that picture of the of that field where your two instruments are set up?
Yeah, let me kick it up here.
Okay. Okay, here, right here. So, like, going back to what I said, let's try to break this down very in better detail. Got to hide that one. Oh, you had it up there.
There, is that up now?
Yes, there it is. So, going back to how I started off, I was saying if we were going to lay out a convenience store here, uh, some new little building, a little parking lot, some curb and gutter, some drainage, maybe a detention pond, whatever, just the typical commercial site on some road intersection corner. These two instruments have to be able to perform together and achieve the same vertical and in this case mostly vertical because you're using a level. They have to match each other on this construction site. Otherwise, people would be pretty daggone mad that the curb is not right and the pipes aren't right and nothing's working. The waters are not flowing in the right direction. So I think you agreed that they should be able to perform and match each other to the nearest eighth inch, right, on this construction site.
And they do. You're missing the whole point here. The whole
No,
point.
I think you are because you're trying to take that level and
No, Jesse,
photograph something 2 miles away, and there's no way that that level can perform at the same level of accuracy on this construction site. They're not going to. And then the other thing I brought up that it's you that aren't listening to this and understanding it, your transit, your theodolite there can't operate in one face. You must make face one, face two, or otherwise known as direct and reverse observations. So honestly, your test here shows me that if they agree within a foot of each other at 2 miles away for that purpose of showing the drop, yeah, it's acceptable. But trying to say that they have to match each other to a foot 2 miles away, just think about it. How can that possibly be true? It cannot.
and that's what I'm saying. You're missing the point. That's the whole presentation here is that when you're looking through your theodolite across your lake and you're at a 90-degree zenith and you're looking over your target, the reason for that is you have refraction and instrument error.
And
That's
how much? How,
you,
how
that's
much?
the reason why you have to
No, the
go
question is how much is refraction affecting that measurement across the lake? How much?
each instrument is different.
No, no, we're talking about refraction. I'm using a 1 arc second theodolite. All right. So what is the amount of effect of refraction over that distance?
I'm not talking atmospheric refraction. I'm talking refraction within the instrument.
Okay, well now you've just,
And
that's a good curveball you threw me, man. I've never heard of refraction inside the instrument. Hey, Larry,
why you haven't heard of that,
stand by. Larry,
you haven't heard about that because they sell it to you
who
as
they?
temperature of the earth, geodetic surveying. They serve it up to you and teach you along the way that that is measurable curvature of the earth. And I'm telling you, it is not. It is natural, and every instrument, it is provable
Well,
and repeatable.
okay. All right. So this textbook.
Let me tell you a story, Jesse.
No. We're not gonna wander. Not
Well,
gonna wander. We're sticking to 8 inches times.
here, Jeff.
Just pause 1 second. We're sticking to 8 inches times the mile squared formula tonight. I would say if you've got other tangents to go to, we add them to the list, but just hold 1 second. Right now, I want to learn about what you are talking about. and that is refraction inside the instrument. I need to look into that. I was going to ask Larry if he has ever heard of that. Larry is he's got 10 years on me doing geodetic surveying, and if I want to know if he's heard of this. Okay, can you hold on one second?
Sure.
I'm not a fast typer. So I'm just asking Larry, has he ever heard of refraction inside the instrument that you are talking about? And we'll see if he gets back to that. Maybe he has a source for it. But right now you're saying it's talked about inside this J.F. Heather's book, and I'll look into that. So, when you say they, you got to say who. Don't tell me they. I'm a self-taught surveyor. I've not gone to university for geodesy or anything. I'm not a geodesist. I'm a
You're
person who.
just like me.
What, pardon me?
You're a technician just like me.
No, I'm a licensed surveyor in the state of New Jersey, but my love and passion is geodetic measuring, geodetic surveying, and the things that you are saying don't convince me that what I'm doing isn't working. I'm trying to show you how you can take that TopCon right there, and in that field right there, show yourself. You could replicate tests that I've done, and then tell me how that's not the Earth's curvature. Tell them, do the measuring. Like this photograph here thing isn't really a test. It's just photographs through these instruments. I've taken similar photographs too, and I wouldn't say that those are measurements. I would like you to take the measurements. Like when you talk about my lake tests, I measured multiple sets of zenith angles that all repeat and agree with each other across that lake, and it shows that the lake is a curved surface, just like the road surface was, not on Route 206. As a matter of fact, have you seen the tests I've done? Very short lines, like 400 feet, 500 feet, 800 feet. Have you seen any of that? Have you seen those tests?
Your test proved going across that water is that the refraction and the distortion within your instrument is constant.
Okay. Well, I'm going to, again, I got to kind of I don't know about refraction inside the instrument. So you're saying then what is the effect if these instruments are flawed to that degree? Are we then saying that everything that we have all around us is off in some way or not where we think it is?
I believe that, the whole, and that gets us into the state plane coordinate system, which we don't have time for.
Well, it's one of our topics, but I'm just saying, just sticking to this, I wanted you to describe to me how the 8 inches times a mile square formula works, and you kind of haven't done that yet. Maybe you'll get to it. We've jumped into this problem with instruments that they have internal refraction that throw off their measurement capability, which then my next question is then, is everything wrong? Like the topographic maps, are they wrong? Do we not know the elevation of Mount Everest?
Yeah, we know
Mount McKinley?
When you go and you set an elevation on a geodetic point, do you trig that elevation into that geodetic point if it's going to be a first or second order?
Say that again, because I didn't follow quite how you were saying that.
How do you establish on an NGS monument the elevation?
How do I do it? It has a published elevation.
How do they perform that? Do they do trigonometry leveling to that, or do they do differential leveling?
Well, it depends on if it's a first or second order or third order leveled benchmark.
That's what I said. First or second order. How is it established? With what instrument is it established with?
A benchmark, first or second order, or yeah, first or second order benches, even third order, are differentially leveled. That's
Okay.
how they determine those.
So if your theodolite is as accurate as what you're saying, why would they go through all the effort to run differential leveling when you could trigonometry or when you could trig level to these things much quicker?
Well, I don't. There are marks that are trig leveled to.
And
Why
they
would you? You
first
know,
or second order, will they?
absolutely not. I mean, do you know what the accuracy specification is on a first order level run?
Within tens of thousands of a foot.
Yeah, they're very, very precise, and the site lengths are very, very short.
Why do you
It takes a long time to do first order leveling.
exactly? And the reason why is because they know of the barrel distortion and refraction within the
All
trend
right.
itself.
Okay. Okay. So you're
Over,
saying they know this.
yes,
Okay. So is this the only paper that mentions this problem, this 1849 book, or do you have other papers or books or references that talk about this effect inside these instruments?
they teach it. If I'll bet if you talk to somebody that's actually took 4 years or 8 years in college for surveying, it was covered within that course.
All right, Larry here says, don't give you this platform to spread this misinformation. Um, I don't take the same view, Larry. I'm really trying to learn from Chris here. Uh, how he, like I said in the description of this, is that he and I are using similar instrumentation. He says the Earth is flat. I measure it and find it to be curved, and but he's telling me that it's because of there's problems in the instruments. I'm willing to try to find this out. I so yeah. You're not reaching me, man. You're telling me that the instruments are flawed. You've given me a book from. Hold on a second. Give me a book from 1849. Now, then you asked me this question just now. This is the last question that we were just going over. You asked me, why don't they use, why would they go through all that effort to run levels that way instead of just using a theodolite? Was that your question?
Yes.
Okay. Well, because the theodolite cannot produce first order leveling. That's why. So if they want to do first order leveling and achieve those accuracies, they're going to use a level,
Okay, then
not a theodolite.
what instrument did they use to measure the curvature of the Earth over long distances?
What year are you talking? Because there's a lot of different instrumentation that has been developed through the years.
Pre-GPS.
Pre-GPS, well, we could go back to the 1600s. So, triangulation, serious triangulation begins in the 15 and 1600s and then really proliferates greatly through the 1700s.
Was that for only horizontal?
No.
So they did use trigonometry leveling back in, let's say, the 1800s, early 1900s.
Of course. But again, realizing that it isn't comparable to the leveling procedure. So they kind of did both. And here's what they would do is, do you want to see a map of this? Do you want to see a map?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. I will go back to sharing my screen. And so let's see. stop presenting you for a second and now present me. All right, so it's, let's see, what do I want to bring up? There's so many choices. Have you looked at any of the geodetic control diagrams?
No, not the ones you sent me. I've looked into the early trig.
No, I'm just talking about the maps. These maps. Have you ever seen this? Like you can pull up any. Let's look at your neck of the woods. Are you near Denver?
Yep, just outside of Denver.
All right, let's look at your map. Let's view the PDF. Do you see my screen? Let me make sure everybody. What am I doing? Let me go back to here. Yeah, good. Okay. So let's see here. You can look up these diagrams for pretty much the whole United States, and what you'll see is the triangulation. All right, you see that clearly?
Yeah.
And then you also see the leveling, and that's second order leveling right there. Here's first order leveling. That's a first order level line. The red is USGS, that's U.S. Geological Survey. The black is the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey. So back then, pre-GPS, you needed, if you were going to cover these vast territories, you had to get up and high, and so they most of these are up on tops of mountains, and where they, when you're not in mountainous terrain, that's when they put up the big towers. You familiar with that?
Yeah, and they use the 10 or 12-inch mirror for their target.
Yeah, the heliotrope to point. Let me see. Here's the Bilby Steel Tower. These guys. This would be in lower elevations where there are no mountains to get up onto. They would set up lots and lots of these Bilby towers, which are 100 feet in the air. So the instrument is up at 100 feet. It is on its own stand, all right? So it's on its own tower so that when they're walking around, they're not disturbing the instrument. And that's the observer's tower. And then here's one of these lights. They would actually use lights at nighttime, put them up here. So maybe like way over here, do you see where my mouse is pointing? That might be another tower over there with a light on it over. And by the way, down below is a disc. One of those brass discs is down on the ground. Same thing over there. So that's how they would do the triangulation. There's the Empire State Building. I would say this picture, this crosshair, this is within, with refraction involved, plus or minus 40 feet. Okay, not 4 inches or anything. It's just a picture. Oops, wrong thing. Where am I going? Back to, geez, too many things open. Oh my God, come on. There we go. This is what I wanted to show. So back to this. So obviously, for the leveling, they would have to choose easy routes to go along, like say along a river or highway or railroad tracks or something like that, because they, it's difficult. But every once in a while, they would make a level tie up to a triangulation station. Not all of them, but some of them. So you can look at these maps and find out, basically what they did. And then for all of these ones that weren't leveled to, they would be, of course, they'd measure all these horizontal angles, but they'd also measure vertical angles to determine a trig elevation, which is no way as accurate as the leveling, but it's sufficient for distance reduction usage. When you gotta compute these distances, you have to kind of know what elevation each of these are. So even if they're getting elevations at plus or minus 3 feet, it's sufficient for those computations. Does that help you understand the difference between why you would use trig levels or why you have to use high order differential leveling?
Jesse, whenever I ask a question, it's not because I'm stupid and I don't know the answer. When I ask a question, I know the answer to it.
Oh, you ask questions that you already know the answer to?
Yes.
Why would you do that?
To pick your brain and get you to explain your side of it. Tell me your side of the story as a geodetic surveyor on
Well, I
how.
just did that. Is that a problem? I'm not calling you stupid. I mean, I think that's pretty disingenuous. You ask me a question you already know the answer to. I'm not doing that to you. I'm asking you things. I'm asking you to explain how it is and what you think because I don't know what you think
and,
and believe. So
and
anyway, for everybody else, okay, so you already knew that. Great. Everybody else, I hope that was helpful.
Exactly. And that's another reason why I asked Jesse, because
Okay.
everybody in this chat has no idea what a point is. I'll bet 75% of the people in the chat have no idea what an actual point is.
Yeah, well, people that follow my channel are learning because these are the kinds of things I show people. I give them the links to these things, and people are thanking me all the time for what I'm sharing with them. And so I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, and so let's try to get this back to some path where we were actually making some headway. We were. I'm going to go back. I'm going to, I guess, give the screen back to you. I'm going to stop. Give it back to you. Present to everyone. There you go. You're on, and let's bring it back to 8 inches times the mile squared. Because I don't think that's I don't think that's been covered yet.
And you want my viewpoint from me believing in the flat Earth. And if you need my viewpoint in 8 inches per mile squared, there is no 8 inches per mile squared. We live on a flat plane with undulating terrain.
Well, now you're stating a belief. How about this? Maybe we should do this. You've shown pictures through your instrument. But we're at the hour. We're at an hour here. Why don't we? I'll propose this. See if you agree. How about this? I'm going to go do the research that you've shared with me about this Royal Military thing, 1849 Joe F. Heather. I'm going to look into that. And by the way, if you have any other stuff on that topic of refraction within the instrument, I would really like to have that. I want to read on that. Here's what I propose to you: to attempt and try some of the tests that I've done where you actually record measurements, not just photographs. Take the measurements and we'll come back and analyze them. The instrument on your YouTube channel, is that an S series instrument, an S6? Do you have access to that? Is that at work?
It's at work. I don't have access to it after.
Do you run Traverse occasionally?
Yes.
Okay, so I think probably even on the course of the job, you'd probably end up with some of this data without even having to take any extra time to collect it because it's pretty much it's being done on a daily basis. If you run a Traverse, what kind of line lengths do you generally measure? 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 2,500 feet? What kind of sight lengths do you typically measure when you're traversing in Colorado there?
Yeah, we usually break down city blocks. Anymore, I think anymore the long distance stuff is all done with GPS and the fake plane system.
Yeah, well, okay. So traversing what, 600 feet or so, or
Yeah.
city? Yeah. Or even if you can borrow the thing on a weekend, I'd say find a north-south running road, right? Because you have a lot of these roads. You're in a sectionalized lands where you've got north-south running roads and east-west running roads. So you could do the L test, measure north-south, let's say, I don't know, half a mile, 2,500 feet or so, um, and measure from both ends. That's it. Zenith angles from one end, measure from the other end, both ends, just reciprocal zenith angles, and then go east-west from the same point. I think we talked about this before. Now that I think about it, on one of our last hangouts we did. But do you think you could do that? Just do an L test. I call it an L because you're making the shape of an L. You're going north-south and east-west from the same point. Collect that data. I bet that whole thing might take 2 hours to do. And let's look at that data. Let's look at those observations.
You mean within a week? That'd probably take.
Oh no, I don't think we have to schedule this next week. I mean, no. What you tell me? What's good for you?
Oh, probably a couple weeks.
Okay. So, and yeah, let's do like we could reconvene in a couple of weeks, and or on that, give you time to collect that. If you want to do this again next week on one of the other topics, I'm up for that too. It's totally up to you.
Okay, I'll get back with you. And now,
Okay.
before we go,
All right.
I'd like to tell this short little story. And the story, what it is this lady and her daughter, as her daughter's growing up, every Thanksgiving, she helps her mother make the ham for the Thanksgiving dinner. So her mother gets out a pan, she gets out the ham, she sets the ham up on the counter and cuts off both ends of the ham. She sets the ham in the pan and cooks it. So as the years go along, they change traditions, and her mother starts going over to her daughter's house, and her daughter starts preparing the meal. So it's Thanksgiving again, and the daughter takes out her pan, takes out the ham. She puts the ham on the counter and cuts off both ends of the ham, puts it in the pan, and right as she's going to put it in the oven, her mother asks her, "Why did you cut off both ends of the ham?" And her daughter told her, "Well, that's the way you made it the whole time when I was growing up." And her mother looked at her and said, "I cut off the ends of the ham because it didn't fit in the pan." Now, the moral to this story is this lady assumed this whole time while she was growing up that was the way to prepare a ham, not knowing that if her mother would have explained to her that she was cutting off the ends of the ham because it didn't fit in the pan, she would have known. Now, that's what happens in a lot of things, medical field, surveying. When I come up through the ranks, who taught me how to survey? A person that was older than me, that was taught this is how you do it. And the person that taught him was taught the exact same way. So in my paradigm, I'm not cutting off the ends of the ham anymore, because I now realize there's another way to look at this, and there's other things that's been ignored throughout the years, like the instrument error within the instruments that everybody wants to discontinue. And the reason they want to do that is the horror of what that is going to bring forth. What it's going to bring forth is that when you're looking at a target, 2 miles away and it's below your crosshair, it has absolutely nothing to do with the curvature of the earth. It has everything to do with the way the instrument is made and operates.
Oh, well, you just clued me into something here. The curvature of the earth in 2 miles isn't that foot that you're looking at on that telephone pole. Is it?
I didn't say it was, and I didn't represent it as of. The
No,
only
but I mean, but well, let's
shows
if you're presenting that
it's
as an instrumental error, right? A refraction within the instrument.
it's repeatable. It's a repeatable experiment. And if you're honest with yourself and you try the same thing, you will find the same thing out. Now, I am going to take this transit and compare it to my S6, and I'll bet there's a difference in it too.
Well, there will be, and I've already explained to you why.
It has nothing to do with the instrument being out of colonization, Jesse. Nothing.
Uh, I disagree with you, and you'll find out. You'll find that out because listen, you have to with a theodolite. You have to, if you're going to try to measure to the nearest foot at a 2 mile long observation, you have to measure in both faces. You can't just measure it in one face, and that's what you're doing. So you're not even using the instrument properly. You're ignoring the instrumental error, and then you're taking a picture of it and saying, see, the instrument has error. Yes, it has error. We know it has error. Do the observation correctly. If you ignore it, it's going to show you're going to be able to make this claim. And your claim is based on your misunderstanding of how to operate this equipment.
No,
It is. Now
no.
listen. Here, listen. I'm gonna. You told your long story. You told your long story. No, Chris, you told your long story. And now I'm gonna. Now I'm gonna. I'm not gonna tell a story. I'm gonna talk about what you're doing. Okay, so stand by. I've already explained this to you. You have two instruments, and you're using both of them incorrectly, taking those pictures. On the right, you have a auto level. The auto level cannot perform at those distances to the nearest foot. It isn't possible. So you're going to have a difference there. Even though you've set them up level with each other, you've taken a picture of just how different they are over 2 miles. And you already just told me, well, we kind of don't measure that far anymore. We use GPS for everything. I've said that a lot too. We use GPS for the long distance stuff. And we use this level and total station instrument locally on the city block. So now you're taking these two instruments, taking a picture through them, and showing how different they are at those distances. And guess what? No kidding. You have not revealed something to us. You've just taken a picture of what we know to be true. The auto level does not perform to the nearest foot at over 2 miles. The total station instrument cannot possibly perform in phase one only in 2 miles. You must take phase one and phase two readings. So why don't you try that and see if your telescope crosshair is below the insulator when you put it in phase two. It probably will be. But guess what? That's just picture taking. Now, if you want to make some measurements, you could measure zenith angles to that insulator in phase one and phase two. Repeat that in those hazy conditions. If you repeat that 4 times, I'd say, you will get probably a pretty decent determination of where the insulator is. Does your S6 have direct reflectorless capability? Like, in other words, you can measure without reflectors to distant objects?
Yes.
Okay. This is another test I kind of remember proposing to you a while back, either by text or email. We were chatting, and I said, look, why don't you go to where a building is? Let's say you're surveying a high-rise building. Measure the 2 top corners using your direct reflectorless instrument and get a good location on those from a reasonable distance away, within, 800 feet away of the building, let's say. Then go further away. Traverse away from the building, establish a point. Now at this stage, you're probably too far to get your direct reflectorless to reach. Okay? But what can you do? You can triangulate. You could measure the top, the corners of the building from that location. And if you intersect those, if you do it as an intersection problem, you will determine coordinates that match the direct reflectorless close-up measurements. That will show you just how well your instrument does perform, whether or not there's this so-called internal refraction in the instrument or not. So that's another test you can try. So I really think that one would take longer. Obviously, there's more effort in that. It's very similar to what I did when I visited Soundly across Lake Pontchartrain. I triangulated the building close by, went across the lake and measured angles to the building that matched the observation. Done that in Philadelphia with the Comcast building, measuring it from the Apple Pie Hill Tower, 34 miles away, and then also measuring it close by from the Camden waterfront, triangulating to the building. These things produce what is it? Consistent results. Okay, they're not forced. They're not. Yeah, I see it all the time. People saying, "Oh, you're supposing a curve. You are building in a curve," and it's like, no, actually, all I did was make the measurements. I'm not doing anything about curvature. You just make the measurements, and you will see the result. Same thing for the lake. You can try these tests yourself. You can't just explain it away by some old book. You should try it yourself. Try repeating these observations. Do the L test. We're getting long here. It's 10:15. Like I said, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to learn about internal refraction on the instruments. Will you agree to take some time and do a north-south reciprocal zenith angle observation over, let's say, 2,500 feet? And then from the same point at the south, go east or west, whichever. If you go east, it's going to look like an L from that same point, and give me the job file. The .job file is binary, so nobody can fudge anything. It is what it is. It's going to record the circles on the instrument, the sensors, the electronic sensors on those vertical and horizontal circles. Do it in phase 1 and phase 2. I would say over 2,500 feet. If you do, put it, you know how fast that gun is. Is it, you got a robotic one that it turns and measures to the glass itself, or do you have to look through it?
No, it's robotic.
Okay, cool. So it's going to be, just so people understand, I've made videos about this before. We have the option, we can look through the eyepiece, aim the crosshair on the target, press record, press measure. But these robotic instruments have sensors in them that emit a light source to the retroreflector. The light source comes back. It tracks that. And if you collimate the instrument properly, it will do a very good job at actually pointing at that glass. So, and I've done it. I've tested. Maybe you've done it too. You're curious to know, hey, if I measure it with my eye, do I get the same result if I, you let the auto lock do the measuring? You compare the two, and they're the same. So that's something you should try doing.
And what is this going to prove or show?
Well, I think it's going to, you will be making measurements similar to the way I make measurements. So we're, whether you do it or I do it, I would like to have some data from you.
So
and then let's look at those reciprocal zenith angles and see what they reveal. And
measuring a slope angle, correct?
Huh?
It's going to be a slope angle is what we're measuring. That's the only thing that you can measure with a transit, is the difference in slope.
Well, I've done it where I set the instrument up to be level with the target so that they are both level with each other. I've done it that way. And I've done it where that's not the case. Is that what you mean? Like, say you're on a sloping road? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about anytime you set up a transit and you site a backsite, you are measuring slope difference between the crosshairs of the instrument and the center of that target.
Well, I guess it's a slope. Yeah, it's a slope distance. You mean the slope distance? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah, slope distance, right. But yeah, the distances we're not going to be that concerned with. We're really going to be looking at the zenith angles.
which is a slope measurement.
It's a vertical angle.
Correct. Which is a slope.
Sloping to what?
You're going to be measuring the angle, the difference in angle from if the instrument was set up at 90 and you had to turn your crosshair down to hit your target, you are measuring the slope difference from 90, correct?
Well, yeah, but I mean, look, I think you're kind of reading into this a little further than need to. Just read on what reciprocal zenith angles are. I mean, whether they're sloped to each other depends upon the elevations of the 2 points. I mean, it could be that the point is above the target, or your target might be a zenith angle of 88. So that means it's, as you're saying, sloping up. Oh, okay. But now when I pop the instrument off and put it up where the target is and put the target where the instrument was, now it's going to be sloping back
Correct.
down, right? So I don't know what that has to do with anything that we're actually discussing, which is comparing the reciprocal zenith angles. Whether they're sloping up or down, it just depends upon which one's higher than the other. Or if you want, you can add a little bit of advanced idea to the test and set the points to be level with each other. If you have a grade of road where you can do that, again, I'm not familiar with exactly where you are, but if you can find a stretch of road where you can get the 2 points to be pretty good, pretty, level with each other, like say they're both elevate. You're up at like 5,000 feet elevation, something like that, huh?
Between 52 and 55.
Yeah. So, just using some numbers, like say you could put a stake in the ground and say that's at elevation 5,200 and go 2,500 feet down the road and set another stake at 5,200. They're level with each other. And then set the instrument up and the target up at the same height above, 5 feet and 5 feet, let's just say, to use round numbers. Now the two instruments are level with each other. Measure the reciprocal zenith angles from station A to station B, or 1 to 2, however you want to call it. Do that. Then do the same thing. Go east or west. I prefer east because it makes an L. And go from point 1 to point 3 now. And if that's level, that'd be pretty cool too. I just did that test last week in my little park test network, and those points are all within 400 or 500 feet of each other. And I set the instruments. By the way, if the points aren't exactly level, I just find the average elevation and then just adjust, or I buck into being level by setting the instrument and the target up at the heights they need to be for them to be level. I hope that made sense. So yeah, anyway, you ought to try that. So we could end this one here tonight. When do you want to come back?
I'll get back with you.
Okay. And as far as the list goes, or were you interested in any one of those particularly, or did you have anything else you wanted to add to the list?
No, take care of this list first. The biggest one on that list would be the state plane coordinate system.
Okay, you want to do that one next?
Yeah, we could dive into that one. I've spent quite a bit of time diving into all the mathematical construct behind that.
Okay. I've been using the state plane coordinate system since, I guess, 80, 82, 83, something like that.
Do you
Yeah,
know when it started?
like way before GPS.
Do you know when it started?
Yeah,
When did it start?
1933.
By an unnamed engineer. You would have thought that they would know this guy would be shrined
Adams.
up with that idea. In the article I read, he was unnamed.
Ah, well, his name's Adams.
But yeah, that's one
You know
subject
which
that
state
does
it
a lot of
started in? What state did it start in?
North Carolina.
Yeah. I mean, what are you trying, like you're like adding mystique and mystery to it? It's like it's the hidden hand that created some mysterious coordinate system. Is it's just it's similar to UTM. It's just that it's state by state, zone by zone. But we can get into that when we talk next. I'd look forward to that.
Yeah,
What do you got there? That's a cool little map. California Nevada boundary survey.
yeah, I was going to show you this. This is the four surveys that they could never agree upon to find out the exact boundary between Nevada and California. In 1980, the Supreme Court finally had to make the decision.
Yeah, isn't that something about boundary surveys? How they'll describe the line and say it's here, there, and it goes from here to there. Like we have the same thing here in New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. There are boundary disputes among the states. I think it's because surveyors did not describe it. It's described by lawyers. So
This was
they'll add ambiguity into it, and then someone has to go out and try to interpret what they legislated to be the boundary, and you could come up with different ideas. Oh, I guess it should be here, it should be there,
well, they
and then they'll finally take it to court and adjudicate the line is here. You know,
yeah. Some of these
happens all the time. Happens not only between states but between countries and or even on the local level with landowners. You know, they both have deeds that say their line is here and here, but yet there's various interpretations on where to place the line.
Yeah, on these state boundaries, most of them were laid out on latitude or longitude lines. They were very specific on where these boundaries were supposed to go. So the interpolation of where they were supposed to go was fairly straightforward.
So it then came down to one guy's ability to determine that latitude over another, and maybe some guy didn't do such a good job or something like that, and then someone else comes out and says, nah, he's way off, it's really over here.
Yeah, so that brings into question the accuracy of triangulation. If you can get the USGS and some of these top line surveyors back in the day that couldn't agree within a couple miles of each other of where these state lines were supposed to go, that brings into question how accurate these measurements were over long distances.
Yeah, well, if you're curious about that, I'm sure you have a lot of those discs out your way in your where you live. You can literally test that for yourself. I've done it.
And then that brings into question also if they can't horizontally agree with a state line that's laid out on a specific parallel, then how in the world could they ever accurately measure what you call curvature of the earth?
Oh, I see what you're doing here. You found one of these one-off strange, one-off, unique situations about a state boundary issue, which I haven't even read the example there to find out who did what and what was the error. And you're taking that and extrapolating it into questioning the accuracy of all of the geodetic markers. And then from that, you're extrapolating to say, therefore, how can they possibly determine the size and shape of the Earth? Well, let me answer that. Have you read a book called The History of the Determination of the Size and Shape of the Earth by Arc Measurements?
Yes, I sure have.
You've read that book? Okay. Uh, that book goes through the whole deal. Their search for, let me pull something up for you.
I've got it up on my screen right now.
Yeah, that's a great book. You should really spend some time researching. I would look at that book as more of like a pamphlet that is almost like an outline, and jump up to, like, say, the 1600s when serious triangulation really began. And then also you will learn about the refinement in instrumentation, how it changed from cruder instruments to become better and better instruments, and the methodologies, especially the methodology to measure the distances for the baselines. In fact, I've got one here in my own backyard. This line that they measured for the state of Delaware was probably one of the longest baselines they were able to measure with these wooden rods. It's amazing the effort that they put into this search for what they wanted to know, and that was how many miles are in a degree of curvature. That's what they were really wanting to know, and that's when they sent people to Lapland and Peru, the two expeditions to determine that. That's a great book. So
I read that story actually.
the
And
next one I'd recommend is mentioned in the back of that book right there. It's in the this book was written in 1906, and they had just completed in the late 1800s. The report went out in 1900. It's called The Transcontinental Arc of Triangulation. I'm sorry, the Transcontinental Triangulation and the American Arc of the Parallel, where they triangulate along the 39th parallel from Cape May, New Jersey to I think it's like San Diego. No, not San Diego. I'm sorry, Sacramento, up in Northern California. Check that one out.
yeah, and
And
that
and so this example that you're given of a state boundary dispute, and then your thinking process of extrapolating that to just say, well, that means they can't do anything. That's like saying,
I'm
well,
sure
let's find the worst case scenario of anything and then just say that's the par, that's the standard, and nothing's better than that. That's ridiculous. Are you
actually
saying that a particle accelerator is not perfectly aligned to microns? Do they not have the ability to make measurements at sub millimeter? Is that possible or not?
I'm not. That's not one. There's not just one example, Jesse. The Four Corners is in the wrong area. Every
Yeah,
one,
but again, look, you're taking two
every
things,
one of
Dude,
every
you are
one of the
mixing,
corners in Colorado is in the wrong place.
Man, you are mixing up two different things. You're really going hog wild with this thinking. Look, you pointed that out to me on my boundaries video. You said the Four Corners is in the wrong place. It's in the wrong place because of interpretation. Some people said it's to be at this longitude, and they measured the longitude from Washington, D.C. And the other people said, no, it's supposed to be measured from Greenwich, England. That's zero longitude. And so they end up with different ideas about where to place it. However, the accuracy of where they placed them in those wrong places is high. They have high accuracy. It just happens to be in the wrong place. Do you understand that?
The
Like,
myth,
here's an example. Have you ever heard of people saying, okay, we got to go survey this piece of property. We got to stake out a house. And they go stake out the house. Well, they stake it out very accurately. It's precisely. I mean, they've got all the right measurements. It's square and so forth. But guess what? They put it on the wrong lot. They made a mistake. They went to the wrong lot and they staked out the house precisely. It's just wrong. It's in the wrong place. That's the kind of example that you are citing. And then you're extrapolating that to mean, oh, we can't do anything. We can't measure the curvature of the Earth because we can't seem to get these state boundaries right. I don't buy that. I mean, if that's how you're thinking about things, how are you supposed to help me understand flat Earth? I mean, to me, that's how you concluded the Earth is flat, by that kind of thinking. Seriously. The two things don't mix. They don't match.
well, what you just stated about the four corners, yes, there was a misinterpolation of where they were going to measure from. And if that story held true, it would have been over 2.5 miles off of the true location. When they took into consideration that they misconstrued where they were supposed to measure from, it is still 1,850 feet off of its actual true location
You mean of where it's supposed to be?
of where it's supposed to be.
All right. Can they get it right now, though? Can we get it right? Can
And
we can we figure out where that disc is that everyone's taking pictures of themselves on? I mean, honestly, this is what I just don't have the words for how to describe what you're doing. Uh, do we know where that disc is now? Even though we can recite all the problems and mistakes that were made, I mean, that's all you're doing is saying these guys that made these mistakes. That's as good as it gets. We can't do any better. Nobody can measure any better than what they did because they got it all wrong. Are you really saying that?
no, I'm not saying that nobody could get it in. That's how they figured out they got it in the wrong place.
All right, but you
They
previously were
finally,
showing that map of Nevada, California, saying you went all you. I mean, it's recorded here. I mean, you basically said they can't get this within miles. How can we trust all these geodetic markers and all this triangulation?
and
That's what
I
you said,
that,
huh?
and I stick with that.
Oh, well, you'd have to prove that. You can't. You can believe that and you can accuse them of that, but the fact is, all those triangulation discs, their accuracies are reported, and you can go out and verify them for yourself. Go find them and measure between them. You know, just do it. But we're beyond the hour, and we're getting into the next hour. I don't. It's been fun. I mean, I enjoy the couple of tangents we've taken here, but I'd rather conclude it with the fact, like I said, I'll go ahead and do some. Will you? Oh, let me ask you that. Will you please send me the information about this book that you're talking about?
Yeah, I can.
And do you have anything else besides that book that
I'll,
talks about that?
I'll dig some more up for you too. Yeah, and then the next few days.
All right.
I just
And
this one kicked up because it's the original.
okay. And yeah, so yeah, send me that and anything else related to what are you calling it? It's refraction within the instrument.
Yes, that's how he explained it.
Okay. And you asked me to send you my specifications, which I did, and I asked you to send the same. I didn't get that from you, but you have a TopCon. What is that? What model is that TopCon?
It's GS2.
Oh, it's a GS2.
Yeah,
That's the TopCon total station. Or that's your level.
GTS-2.
Oh, a GTS-2. I'm familiar with that one. And how about the level? How about that level?
It's an NA-724 Leica.
NA-724. Is that a digital level?
No.
Okay. And you said you have an S6. You
Yeah,
you have access to an S6.
yes.
And what is that thing? A 3-second?
No, it's a 1 second.
Oh, one. Awesome. Okay, cool. So will you do the L test?
Yeah, I'll see if here in the next few weeks if I can talk my boss into borrowing the transit over the weekend.
Awesome. It'd be worth it. Oh, what's the accuracy on your GTS-2?
Oh, the specs?
Yeah.
I can send them to you.
Is that a 2-second? Is that why it's called a GTS-2?
I don't believe so. I think it's a 5 second.
5-second. All right. Now with a 5-second gun, I mean that's yours, your own gun, right?
Yeah.
Huh. Have you figured out how to hook up your data collector to it, or do you just use it and read and write?
Read and write.
Okay, because you can, with the right cable, hook that to your TSC3. But again, you'd be borrowing equipment, I guess. So,
Yeah.
but you could do that test with the 5-second gun, but you'd have to probably, you're too close. You gotta maybe stretch out the distance a bit, but you'd still be able to you'd still be able to do it, I think. But either way, let me know. And so you want to do state plane coordinates next?
Yeah.
When do you want to do it?
A couple weeks.
Couple. So we'll do. Where are we at here?
Because my Sundays start out at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when I got up this morning. Or 3:30.
Would you have a long drive or something?
Nope. Get up to have a Sunday meeting at 4 o'clock due to where everybody's at. One guy's out in Australia, one guy's in Germany.
Oh, okay. So you do your some kind of hangout. So let's see here. So we're talking about November the 4th. Is that when you're? I'd have to push it out to the 11th if that's okay. I will not. I will be out of town.
Yep, that'll work.
All right, so we'll set it up for November 11th. We'll do the state plane coordinate system. This here we'll have to circle back to, because I guess the conclusion here is that your explanation for the 8 inches times the mile squared, you're saying isn't valid because there's a problem in the instrument causing that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll have to circle back and come back to that. And so we'll each do our due diligence. You're going to do the L test. I'm going to research these books or the links that you're going to send me, and we'll talk about that again. Let's see. I will stop sharing. So no one's sharing. No one's presenting. Now I don't know if you want to stay on or not. I was going to kind of look through the chat a little bit anyway and see. Oh, there's so much. There's more there than I have time to go into now. I guess what I'll do is, just so everybody knows, 50 are still watching, I'm really getting ready to shut this down. It's gone way longer than I thought it would. So what I'll do is drop back and read the chat later, when this thing is posted up online, and see if if there's questions for me. Chris, you might do the same thing if the people are saying anything to you, but I'll try to address anything post post whatever, once it's up there. Okay.
Okay.
All right, Chris. Thanks, man. Are you having a good time with this?
Yeah.
Me too. So I hope we get somewhere with it. I really do. I don't think we reached conclusions tonight. But, let's keep a dialogue going, okay? I really think the truth is in the measurements. I do. And right now, I would say you and I, like I've said, you and I are making similar measurements. It looks like we're interpreting them differently. Let's see where it goes. How's that?
That sounds fine to me.
All right, man. I'm going to press the stop button, and then we'll say good night, everybody. Thanks for coming and tuning in. And as you heard, me and Chris said, we're going to keep this going, and I look forward to it. So have a good night, everyone. Talk to you.